All right, students, welcome to 13.5 about the split and the inability of political parties to the inability for political parties to compromise in the lead up to civil war based around the issue of slavery. I apologize for the audio of this recording. Unfortunately, again, as I stated, I was having some family things that I was dealing with, and I'm still working through them. And so I'm recording from a different location than I normally do with access to my really nice microphone. So this is going to sound a little bit muffly comparative to what I normally am able to give you guys. So I apologize for having to stop. But let's get started. Let's jump right into this here. One of the things is that early on in the late 1848s and into the 1850s, political parties kind of become wishy-washy on how they want to deal with the issue of slavery. They understand if they take a very pro-slavery viewpoint that they're going to disenchant people from the North, and if they take a very anti-slavery position, they're going to disenchant people from the South. So they're often trying to play this middle of the road. We're not going to comment too heavily on it. It's not going to necessarily be at the forefront of our political platforms, but eventually they get drawn into the point where it has to become part of it. It becomes a key factor in when we're talking about the expansion of states and political rights, and also being able to, for the South to protect the institution of slavery. That requires greater political power, so they start needing a political party that is completely dedicated to that cause. And so this is where you start seeing the frictions and the splits and the creation of new political parties to take on the issues that slavery presents. And one of the things is because of slavery and their inability to make any sort of agreement upon it, the Whig Party falls out of favor, basically collapses. The Democratic parties, it breaks them apart also. And what this divide creates is, first off, it starts with like the Free Soil Party, but then it moves into the creation of the Republican Party. So you see new party creation out of this time frame. So let's talk really quickly about Free Soil. Where do they come from? Well, in 1848, Free Soil starts up because they don't believe that there's anybody that's really fighting and advocating and preventing the spread of slavery into the Western territories. And so they were really organized to stop the spread of slavery into the Western territories. They amassed actually pretty strong political candidates. Like they ran Martin Van Buren, who had been president before, but they ran him again. So they actually had the backing of somebody who had a political name, and they also gain a number of political seats too in Congress, where they get 13 people actually elected to Congress. And in all honesty, when you look at American politics, a brand new political party forming virtually out of nowhere, gaining political power that quickly, shows you how powerful an anti-slavery position could become in American politics during this time frame, that they're able to quickly amass political power. When Martin Van Buren ran for president, I believe he captured about 10% of the American votes, which is an extremely high number during this time frame. And so one difference is between this, though, when you look at the Free Soilers position, they're not abolitionists. Instead, they really take the viewpoint of this as being a political issue, where slavery gives like the South and Western states that they were to adopt as an economic advantage over Northern industry and Northern workers. And in fact, one of the things that they were afraid of is eventually the slaves being brought up into the North based off of like the Dred Scott decision, where slave owners would be able to bring their slaves willy-nilly across the line, that they would have these people show up from the South into the North and have their slaves actually start working in the factories and taking people's jobs, because you could actually hire your slaves out to somebody. So think about this. If you were a slave owner in the South and you had 30 slaves and it was a down part of your season, you could go to the North and be like, hey, I got these slaves. You want to just rent them out for a couple months? And you could pay them an extremely low wage, because the slave owner, he's getting money no matter what. You're not paying the slaves. So it's kind of a win-win scenario. So the Free Soils look at slavery as being an economically dangerous institution. So they don't take up a true moral position. Of course, there are people in the Free Soil movement, of course, that do have the moral problems with slavery. But as the Free Soilers in general, this is not an issue for them. But the Republican Party then also really starts to evolve out of the Free Soil Party, and also is really headed up by a lot of the abolitionist groups. And so it also is formed to stop slavery spreading into new territories that are being established and developed during this time frame. So their stated goal is to end slavery from going westward. They eventually want to try to eliminate slavery, but it's not at the core of their political platform yet, and it doesn't become really one until much later. They attracted people that were free soil. They attracted people who were Whig. They attracted Northern Democrats. They attracted people who were anti-slavery during this time frame. So they were able to bring kind of this big tent idea of people who'd been disenfranchised by the other political parties, not willing to take a stand on slavery, really come together to join up with the Republicans leading up to the Civil War. It too, like the Free Soil initially, it grows very quickly in 1954, 1956, gaining seats in Congress. And in fact, they actually had a pretty close opportunity to capture the presidency early on, where they ran a strong candidate, John C. Fremont. You guys, hopefully you remember who John C. Fremont is, because we talked about him during Utah history studies. And if you don't, just remember Pathfinder. Anyways, he comes close to actually winning the presidency, very close. In fact, it's the very first time where the president is almost chosen, Fremont's almost chosen, over the lack of southern state support. So he gets a lot of support in the northern states. And the southern states pretty much don't vote for him at all, but he still comes really close to capturing the presidency. So this is a really wake-up moment for the South when it comes to presidential politics coming forward. The Republican Party, furthermore, they start to attract the likes of like Abraham Lincoln, and he really comes famous for when he goes up against Stephen Douglas in a run for the Illinois Senate. Now, this isn't like this is not how you would see in a senatorial race today, because you have to remember still during this time frame under the Constitution, the state legislatures would pick senators. So it's basically getting the support of the people to get them to support the legislator to support this person to become senator. I know, kind of complex, but anyways, Douglas and Lincoln become engaged in this debate battle throughout the state of Illinois. They meet up constantly in different areas of Illinois, and they would have these grand debates over the morality or the right of slavery, or how slavery should be hashed out or held, or all sorts of issues surrounding slavery. And it really elevates Abraham Lincoln to a national stage because of the telegraph more than anything else, because these speeches are then transmitted across the country about these two men debating about the merits of slavery going on in Illinois. And so this dramatically raises Abraham Lincoln's status. He doesn't win the Senate seat, but he gains massive prominence through his debating with Douglas. And so if you're ever fascinated to see how the debates the debates around slavery really hammered out and came to light in the mid-1850s, the Douglas-Lincoln debates are probably one of the greatest things to read, to see that argument in action. With the Democrats in 1856, they actually put up James Buchanan for president, and he wins. Unfortunately, James Buchanan, in Mr. Lajeunesse' views, probably one of the all-time worst presidents in history, because his inability to even try to stop the Civil War, if anything, he brings it even closer to happening because of his ineffectiveness as a president. So Buchanan, and I do not like him very much. And remember, we talked about Fremont. He almost wins just solely with northern votes too. And this really, again, this is a moment where the Southerners look at it and go, "This is getting worse for us. We're on the verge of soon to have more northern states. Their population is growing faster than us. Their economic system is stronger than ours and better structurally based. We have to find a way, if we're going to preserve the Southern way of farming and life, we're going to have to try to find a way to preserve slavery from alternative means." In the 1860 lead up to the 1860 election at the Democratic Convention, this is where slavery comes to a head in the Democratic Party. It's either you support it or you don't support it. And that creates a fraction of the party where it splits the Northern Democrats and the Southern Democrats. The Southern Democrats walk out. The Northern Democrats, they decide they're going to put up Stephen Douglas. Stephen Douglas is not an ardent slave holder. He's not a strong proponent completely of slavery, but they were hoping that he would have been passive enough that the Southern states would have voted for him with the Northern states too. The Southerners, they put up John Breckinridge. He he and Douglas end up splitting the Democratic votes across the North and the South, and it creates a split that's so divisive that neither Democrat can actually capture the presidency, opening the door for Abraham Lincoln to come in and be able to become elected president without any Southern support. So this is one of the big driving wedges right here, where the South looks at it and says, here comes an abolitionist, that's what they're labeling Lincoln as correctly because he's from the Republican Party, who's going to come and take away slavery from our states without any voice or representation from us. The other issue is now you have more free states, so now the free states control the Senate. The North's population, as we've discussed, has also grown rapidly, so now they have a larger share of seats in Congress. So the South is looking up at the North now, realizing that its political power has pretty much waned away, and if anything, the North soon will be in a position to completely and absolutely abolish the practice of slavery based simply on political power. And so this is when they really start to organize and get together and go, well, if Lincoln is going to be president, as soon as he's sworn in, we are going to start to lead. And this is where we start to see the Civil War really kick into high gear. And this is where you start to see everything start to fall apart. One last thing is, I know that we talk lots about politics, social issues, but as you know, being in my classes, I also always like to talk about kind of the role of how religion plays into this. And it's because the Christian religion plays a heavy impact on American social life for quite a long time in early to mid-American history. And so a study of this is pretty interesting too, because as you see political parties fracture, you also see churches fracture. So a lot of religions, they, especially like the Protestant religions, often are made up of representatives that would meet like at a yearly council meeting to hammer out theological issues, moral issues, ideas of doctrine. They'd get together. And you actually see a breaking apart of between the Northern and Southern Baptists, split between the Methodists, split in the Lutherans. The Catholics don't split because the Catholics follow the Pope. But you do see a fracturing of quite a few of these religious organizations into pro-slavery groups and anti-slavery. And I know it seems illogical for any religious organization to promote the cause of slavery, but you do have Southern ministers down there that use the Bible and say, hey, look, here in the Bible it says that slavery is just fine. So you have this true fracturing of religion over the issue of slavery too. So it's not just happening in people's political lives, it's also happening in their religious lives. So you have to be able to see that, yes, this goes further to entrench into ideas of morality when one side is told from a Southern Baptist pulpit that slavery is morally right in the eyes of God, or if they're from the North that being anti-slavery, willing to pick up arms to free your fellow man is God's will. You can see why people would buy into this idea of morality and right and wrong behind the decisions. So this is, like I said, I throw these brief elements in here talking about it because you need to understand where moral issues are played out when it comes to the larger scale in geopolitics. All right, guys, that ends it for this section here. We're going to get you ready here for the test and get you set up and ready to go real soon. And then after that, we are going to move right into the Civil War, and it's going to be a great time talking about the Civil War in general. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Have yourself a good rest of the day. And if you did not do it, make sure you read those few pages that we had the other day. They have some really important things in there about the Kansas-Nebraska Act, burning Kansas, the Dred Scott decision, things that we've kind of covered already, but just to reiterate those points, because that stuff's going to show up in the test, and those are going to be heavy issues, so make sure you reread that if you did not do it already. All right, guys, have a